pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
States of America, and to the
and
republic
for which it stands,
which stands
one nation,
one
under
nation,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first item of business is the COVID survey. Matthew Williams, do you have a report for us?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. 1 second. Can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Mayor and Council, a few weeks ago, the mayor had asked me to prepare a survey to measure the impact of COVID-19 on our local businesses. As you'll see, this survey was built through surveymonkey.com. We had 10 questions with additional comments for most questions. It was emailed out to 90 city businesses via our business list, and it was promoted through our city social media accounts. 40 businesses responded, and it went live on June 24th. As you'll see on question one was, what is your business type? There were 4 main business types: other, professional, restaurant, and healthcare. Those 4 business types made up for 57% of the city businesses. As you see, there were others, but those were your 4 biggest categories.
Are those percents or are those total numbers? Are they just raw numbers?
Those are percentages, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And question 2, how are your business operations being impacted by COVID-19? As you see from your numbers, there are several of them were close. 28% of businesses said they were doing better with reopening, while as you see, 51% of businesses said they've been greatly impacted. 30% of businesses have now restricted spending, while 33% have seen a decrease in sales. Also, 33% have adjusted their business hours. On the positive side, only 7% have completely closed. Of course, that's still a lot to completely close, even at 7%. At this point in time, what level of impact do you expect to see this to have on your business? Of course, COVID being the impact. As you see the colors at the bottom, 51% of businesses said it would have a medium impact. 36% said it would have a low impact. 8% said other, and only 5% said high. So again, 51% of businesses said COVID would have a medium impact on their business. Question 4. Now the numbers on this one, it's important to see the numbers at the bottom below the pie chart. They were given 4 options: 10%, 25%, 50%, and 75%. So you see on the pie chart where it says the 47% in yellow, that means 47% of the businesses said they'd lost 75% of their business revenue, which of course is a very serious number. So again, 47% of the businesses have lost 75% of their revenue or more. 31% had, go ahead, sir, I'm sorry.
I'm just curious if you took any of these and tried to compare them with this pie chart with the last pie chart, because they don't seem consistent at all.
No.
I would agree. They don't. 31% of businesses reported 50% or more, 16% 25 or more, or 10%, or excuse me, 6% of businesses at 10% or more. So again, that's a pretty shocking number that 47% of businesses reported a 75% or more lost revenue. Question 5, has your business received any stimulus funds? As you'll see, 54% applied for and received stimulus funds. That's positive news. 45% did not apply for any, while only 1% requested and did not receive any. So that's a positive. 54% of businesses did apply for and receive business funding. Question 6. The next few questions are about our mask order. The city of Litchfield Park and Maricopa County are now requiring the use of masks. What are your thoughts on enforcements? You'll see the different options they were given below the question. Other, 37.5. On the next slide, I'll read what other means. 2.5%, I require a mask and will call the police if necessary. In other words, if someone refuses to abide. 35% said I require customers and employees to wear a mask. 22% said I educate my customers with signage. 15% said I ask customers to wear a mask. If they refuse, I allow them anyway. On that note, you may have noticed today that Walmart, Sam's Club, and Kroger/Fry's have all announced they will be requiring masks in their stores. So that is coming nationwide very shortly.
Apparently, the letter really moved the mountain. That's great.
Must have made an impact nationwide, right?
It must have.
Yes, sir. And last of all, 12% said they just refused to enforce it, period. So again, your largest category was 37% with other, and next up was 35 with I require customers and employees to wear masks. The other, what this was, you had to basically fill in the blank to put your comments in there. I'm not going to read all these, but I will read some of them. These are quoted verbatim per their entries. I can face discriminating charges federally for enforcing. It is a violation of federal rights. I will wear a mask in public per directives. I feel this is an elaborate hoax to keep our businesses from thriving. We have had the sheriff's department at our business twice, but they're not wanting to be involved. On that last comment, we did reach out to MCSO and let them know that had been said, and they said they would take care of that issue. We've had no more reports of that issue since that time, just so you're aware. Next question, question 7. How has the mask order impacted your businesses? As you'll see, 54% said it hasn't impacted them at all. 18% said somewhat, but it's necessary if it keeps us from shutting down again. 26% said they have lost customers over it, while only 2% said it's a huge problem and has a huge impact on my business. So again, 54% said not at all. Question 8. What is the biggest thing your business needs during COVID-19 other than returning to business as usual? As you'll see, 65% of businesses said a return to business as usual, or 2/3. 21% said financial assistance, 10% said PPE, mask, gloves, etc., and 4% said human resources assistance. So again, most of all, they want to see things just go back to normal. I think that's pretty much everybody. I know it sure is for me. Question 9, is your business in zip code 85340? We didn't ask them if it was in the city limits because we didn't want to get in the argument about where their business was or was not, so we asked them to be a zip code. As you'll see, 87% of them were in our zip code, while 13% were not.
Interesting.
Last question. What additional comments would you like to share? There's actually 2 slides of these. And again, I won't read all these. I'll just pick and choose a few. Let's open up. This is hurting nonprofits. My employees are having difficulty breathing normally with the enforcement of using masks, especially our front office receptionist. We need to return to business as usual, but also need to get control on outbreaks first. The loss of sales sucks right now, but we have to do what's right. Next slide. Our neighbor businesses are not following the mask guidelines and they are super busy as usual. Please lift this order. It is hurting other local businesses. It should be an individual's right to choose to wear a mask. If a place of business wants to require it, that be up to the business owner. We all understand the risk associated with and without wearing a mask. Businesses still retain the right to refuse service at any time. And of course, you can read the last one if you like. And that's my presentation. Mayor and Council, would you have any questions tonight on the survey as presented?
Questions from the council? Can't see anybody, so I don't have any idea what's going on. Could you get rid of this slide? There we go. Terry, I need to get the council in kind of a grouping of pictures here so that I can figure out who's asking to speak, if anyone. What can you do to assist me since you're the host?
You can drag it, let's see, on the right side of your screen.
Right.
You can drag it over, or you can click on the participant list and click the pop out. And then all the screens should show up.
Well, I have all the screens, but then I won't see anything, but that's all right. All the screens at least lets me see all the council. So does anyone on the council have a question for Matthew about the presentation that he just made? Let me know. I would be happy to recognize you. Okay, I don't see anyone. So I'm going to assume there are no questions. I appreciate you doing this survey for us, Matthew. I had been curious about what we would find out from our businesses, particularly in relationship to our decision as we go forward on how to use this CARES money. So at least it gives us some insight that we have a pretty incredible divergence from the different points of view of our business people, but an awful lot of them seem to be in the more moderate category that seem to understand the importance of the restrictions that are being placed, so that hopefully we will not be back in a situation of having to close all these businesses down, which is what we clearly do not want to have happen. So if
Yes,
there are
sir, I
no
would agree.
other, I'm sorry?
I was just saying, yes, sir, I would agree.
If there are no other questions or comments, we'll move on. Seeing none, we're going to go to Waste Management Recycling Program. Do we have a representative from Waste Management here with us, Clark Landum?
You do. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can even see you now.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members and staff, and certainly appreciate the time you've given me to discuss kind of the recycling challenges that we're facing. And I've always valued the transparency and openness we've had, with the city to discuss these that we're facing. So I just wanted to kind of start, and I won't rehash the entire recycling history, but in a couple, bullet points. In 2017, over 25% of the world's recyclables were imported to China. We all get that, including 50% of all paper and plastics at the time. During that time period, China decided, hey, we're not going to be the world's dumping ground anymore. We're going to start eliminating, all these recycling imports that are coming in, and they really enforced a contamination limit of 0.5, and that's called the blue sky, which is really unreasonable for any bells or any material processing facility to get down to 0.5 contamination. So in summary, China's on the path to eliminate all imports of post-consumer recyclables by 2021. And the reduction of this has really been a ripple effect throughout the world, in particular the United States, with oversupply of commodities and really the depressed commodity pricing and so forth. So as you recall, in 2017, I came before the board, actually 2018, apologies, and we had this same discussion. And at the time, I asked for a 46 cent increase per month per home, and council approved that. At the time, my goal was to be a one-time charge, and we would hopefully see the markets improve and so forth. Unfortunately, through 2018 into 19, we went really from bad to worse in regards to the depression of the commodity value and our processing cost. And I can give you some examples. Up to this time, recently the city of Phoenix just enacted a $6.46 increase to offset their losses, which was essentially a $10 million decrease in their profits that they'd seen year over year. Another close city to Litchfield Park, Surprise. They enacted a $3 increase in 2019 to the constituents, and they did another $3 increase this past year, once again to offset those losses. Really, fortunately for the city of Litchfield Park and city manager Williams and the staff, the residents have been sheltered from these large increases, and that's been through the foresight and vision that city manager and his staff has talked and discussed with Waste Management on the continued issues and challenges that we're facing. We met in 2019, and my goal and really City Manager Williams' guidance was, hey, let's give this another year. Let's see where it goes. And unfortunately, we haven't seen any improvement. To one aspect, we've reinvested the money that and revenues that we make long term into our facilities and assets. And when I say that, most recently, we've reinvested $1 million into our Surprise material recovery facility in regards to screens and robotics, and also some fiber optics, there. So the goal for us, we're invested in recycling long term, is to get a better clean material, cleaner bell that we can sell to the buyers that come in. It is a buyer's market at this time. They can pick and choose what bells they want to be processed. Specifically to Litchfield Park, we invested over $3 million in compressed natural gas trucks where we ran diesel for a time. So from a carbon emissions and gases standpoint, they produce cleaner air. And then also from the resident standpoint, they are much quieter on the street. Just a couple of the bullet points, that I get asked all the time is plastics. Although plastics only represent about 7% of the composition stream that comes out of Litchfield Park, we are finding an end market both domestically and through Mexico for plastics. We've partnered with one of our suppliers, manufacturers of our carts, called Cascade. And they've been able to take and mold post-consumer plastics into a garbage cart. And we're actually placing 8,000 of those carts out, and it's called the Eco Cart. So we found a process where we can turn these plastics around. Secondly, with our waste management uniforms, our supplier, we've been able to build and make our uniforms out of a small portion of plastics within that process as well. 57% of the composition that comes out of Litchfield Park is really paper and fiber. And that's kind of the norm that we're seeing throughout the United States. But through COVID, it's been very critical that we have the feedstock for cardboard boxes that are used for home deliveries, groceries, and really to stock shelving back in regards. So there has been a demand for the fiber and cardboard. Hopefully, that continues and offsets some of the losses that we're seeing. So with that said, my goal tonight is once again to come before mayor and council and to look for a 30 cents 3.0 incremental increase, and that's for to offset some of the values that we're not receiving and increased processing costs. So I kind of open it up from there and see if there's any other additional questions or support that I may give council.
We have questions from council.
And Terry, if you'll flip down to slide, I think it's 7, is that right? Let's see. Yeah, so there's kind of a snapshot that I wanted to be transparent, and this just shows what I built out regarding what the material stream value, what we get per bale, per ton, and from a year ago what it was. So you can see in the top one, there was a difference of $21 per ton. I just really took that by the billable homes that we see, and there's an impact of 33 cents. On the flip side, the processing cost has went up $8.35. That's an impact of 13 cents. There were some other fixed costs that was built into this model, and my guidance to waste management was, that's something we've got to figure out, right? These are two things that material and processing, that we find somewhat uncontrollable. The fixed cost is something that we need to look at. So that's where the reducement came down to 30 cents. And then below that's kind of the summary that I show, and this is specifically for Litchfield Park regarding our monthly P&L. To be transparent, and Matthew and I have had this discussion, we run right now in the 6 figures on being negative monthly at the Surprise material facility.
Okay, are there questions or comments from council? This item is going to come up on the agenda for action in a few minutes. So we'll have another opportunity to potentially to ask Clark questions. But if you have questions now or comments now, it's a good time. It's as good a time as any to bring them up. Looks like Councilman Romack may have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. First of all, Clark, good presentation. We really appreciate the work you put into this. My question, and this is a little bit off, but it regards the use of the single-use plastic. You said you're marketing that or selling that to the Mexican market, and we're going to strangle in single-use plastics if we're not careful. And I hope that you're able to find other markets besides Mexico, but I think it's really a problem that is just surfacing and only going to get worse.
Yeah, and I totally agree. As I mentioned earlier, it is a small composition percentage of the total commodities. However, to your point, there's a lot of focus on the packaging, on how we eliminate, some of the single serve plastics that we do see. I'll back up and regress a little bit. There is a future for mills domestically. They've got to get up and get online. And our hopes are 2 to 3 years down the line that they're up and running and we can find some alternatives for plastics.
Thank you.
Councilman Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First the comment, I think 30 cents is fairly negligible and is reasonable based on the numbers that are there. I just want to have a commitment that if we see the market bounce back where the recycling costs are able to sell at a different level that changes the profitability back, are we able to get those price points reduced? Usually when you give an increase, you're not able to get those back very often. So I just want to make sure we're not continuing to go down a path of constant, if we see profits come back in, we need to make sure that we're taking care of the constituents.
And that's a great point. And that's a discussion City Manager Williams and I have had several times as we look at that. Unfortunately, over the last almost 3 years, there hasn't been any in regards to those coming back. We do have a program where we profit share with cities, and whether that's a 50-50, a 60-40, whatever the breakout is that we look at, so we can look at on an annual basis, how do we move that needle in this regards. If you look at the profit sharing, let's just say that we were at 60-40, and that would equate to about 29 or 30 cents a month, or $3.44 annually that either the residents or the city would owe from a profit sharing standpoint. So there's positives and negatives to that aspect where, the one flip side is, waste management. We take the entire risk of all the materials and processing it and selling it. The other option that City Manager Williams and I are looking at is from a profit sharing standpoint. Is that something that the city and residents would like to get into?
We like to share the profits, Clark, but not the losses. I'm just telling you, we're a city, and so we only look at it one way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, the pain that some other of your neighbored cities are seeing in regards to profit sharing and or the cost effectiveness are way above and beyond what they were getting in revenues. There's been a flip from, for example, the city of Chandler went from $500,000 on a annual basis to a negative $350,000 they're paying now to recycle, and Tempe's probably in the same boat. So there is pros and cons of both sides, but once again, City Manager Williams, will look at that information and present that to council if we want to go down that path.
All right, Councilman Rostolsi.
I had a couple quick questions. I was curious, what's the length of term of our current contract?
So our current contract expires in July 1st, 2021. There is two 1-year renewal options that the city's discretion can use there.
And we started 3 years ago, did you say earlier?
5 years ago.
5 years ago?
2016. Is that right, Sonny? 2016, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a 5-year contract.
And then were we in contract with you prior to that?
I believe so, Sonny.
Yes,
I'm
we had a
not- yeah.
contract with you before that.
And so Sonny, do you know how far back we go with waste management?
This is at least our second 5-year contract, if not more. I honestly do not remember. I'd have to look, but it's been a long time. And I believe they've served our city well.
And then I guess my last question would be, Clark, have you ever come to us in the past and offered us a discount because the recycling business was better than you had expected?
So in this role, council member, I've been in it since 18. So in my time period, I haven't, no, because they haven't.
Sonny, would you happen to know if they've come back to us and offered us a discount because things are better than they thought?
No, we have not ever discussed the discount for recycling.
Okay, thanks.
The one point that you may want to put in with the things you just asked about is throughout all the contract periods with Waste Management, we did go out for public bidding, and in many cases, we received significant number of bids from companies like Republic, and then some smaller companies. In every case, Waste Management was the low-cost supplier, and quite frankly, in terms of the presentations that were made to council, they were clearly the most professional supplier also in terms of the quality of their trucks and the quality of their people and just the general quality of the service that they provided to the communities that they served. So we don't have problems with hydraulic lines leaking and getting all over our streets and problems with them not staying on a schedule, so you have some idea of when they're going to come pick up, what on their pickup days. So they have done, I think, a very good job for us. So all of that needs to be wrapped into the same information. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick comment I wanted to say. City Manager Stevens had asked Sonny and myself to work with Clark on this. I just want to clarify that, of course, I'm the Assistant City Manager, or Mr. Stevens is the City Manager. I have worked with Clark in previous cities, and I appreciate the compliment, but I just thought I should clarify it. So,
but it gets a little confusing when my first name is William and your last name is Williams.
Yes, sir. It sure does.
No, my apologies.
No, not at all.
I was trying to keep up with it because I thought maybe I missed a Zoom meeting. All right, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Your fuel costs have gone down significantly in the last few months for the garbage and for the recycling trucks. How is that calculated into these numbers?
That is not calculated into these numbers, Vice Mayor. This is strictly looking at what our processing costs are at our material recovery facility, and then what our revenue is off of that.
Your fuel costs probably for the rest of this year are going to be quite a bit lower than they've been probably during the entire term of this contract. Are you guys going to come back to us with some kind of discount or some kind of rebates on that because those costs have gone down?
Certainly an option to look at. At this time, I'm not prepared to discuss that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you for the presentation. We will, when we get to our business section, we will, have you available hopefully for questions if those come up from council.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council.
This takes us to our consent agenda. Item number 4, consent items A and B. Is there anyone on council who wants to take any consent item off of the consent and have a discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda items A and B? Is there a motion?
So moved, Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor, is there a second? Second from Councilman Clare. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 This needs to be so that the clerk can see the vote. Otherwise, we'll have to go through a roll call. So just make it clear that Terry can see it. Thank you. Perfect. No roll call. And I'm assuming we do not have anyone on the phone like Lisa. Is that correct? I don't see a phone
She is on the phone, it looks like.
Yes.
Am I?
I can't see her. Lisa, are you on the phone?
Lisa, unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I can now.
Okay,
I need
I'm
to
having all sorts of technical issues here.
Okay.
I lost the screen, so I can't see anybody anymore.
We
Sorry.
can't see you either.
I know,
Uh,
I know.
For purpose of this vote, I have to have a roll call vote with you since I can't see you.
That'll be
uh,
fine.
How do you vote on the consent items A through B? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. In the future, if you want to make a comment, please go ahead and speak up. And when I hear you, then I'll do my best to recognize you immediately or shortly thereafter.
I
Since
will. I will.
I can't see you, so I have no idea if you're back there really wanting to say something. So
Sure, I understand, and I'm sorry. I don't know what I've done here, but I've lost the whole picture. So
well,
I will certainly try and interject where I need to.
okay, thank you. All right, that takes us to our business items. First item of business is waste management license agreement. It says Bill William Stevens. Is that correct, or should it be Assistant City Manager Williams?
That should be me.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so this is the item which you can discuss and vote on. It is twofold. Normally, under our current contract, Waste Management has agreed per contract to get 85% of the CPI increase. That normally happens automatically, and so it never comes to council for a vote until, of course, we have to renew the contract. This year, and I'll let Mr. Lundrum address why, but this year, Waste Management is asking for 100% of the CPI. So that would be a 15% increase for the CPI. In addition to that, there was a initial request to increase the recycling costs, and after discussions, that's now been changed to 30 cents additional. 2 years ago, you know, in the discussions, we had a 46-cent increase. But of course, as the market has deteriorated for recyclables, that has also impacted Waste Management as well in their costs. So that's why Mr. Lundrum is asking, or Waste Management is asking for 30 cents. So it's twofold. One, it's to discuss and vote on whether we want to, council wants to approve 100% of the CPI. And the second part of it is whether council wants to approve a 30-cent additional for recycling. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor, and open it up for questions if Mr. Lundrum wants to answer those.
Clark,
Okay,
presentation.
questions from council? Let's see any hands.
Oh.
Comments? Oh, Mr. Clare, Councilman Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I understand, when we discussed the present.
I'm sorry, didn't get that.
3 cents on one side, 13 cents for a total of 6. And that doesn't matter on this
You are cutting
presentation.
out, Councilman Clare, you're cutting out, and so I can't understand what you're saying.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, in the presentation we had earlier, we had a twofold request, one for 33 cents, one for 13 cents, and none of the numbers match what's in this request that we have here. So I'm just a little bit confused.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman,
Lundrum also
Mr.
has
City
a-
Manager.
Mr. Lundrum also has a presentation available for this to discuss these issues, because there are actually 4 options that were discussed, and that's in your council communication. But Mr. Lundrum has a presentation if you would like for him to present that to you now.
I'm happy to do that if we can do it quickly, and if he thinks it will shed light on Councilman Clare's question, and that is, I think what Councilman Clare is trying to get is a linkage between the numbers in the presentation you just made and these actual numbers that you're requesting, because the linkage is not clear.
Are you
I thought what you said, I thought what was being said in the prior presentation was that there was a total of 46 cents of increase or loss, but that you're only asking for 30 cents of that back from the residents because 16 cents relates to things that waste management should be able to control internally.
You were correct. Yeah, 30 cents is what our request was at this time.
Can you, and I understand that, that this is a time sensitive situation in the sense that our contract calls for it to be made right now. But I think that the vice mayor has brought up a good question. You have a right now to your 85% of CPI, and we can wait a year and then renegotiate, or I'm sure, who knows if we'll exercise the options or whatever. But or we can have you stay with the current contract, but then come back to us and explain what is the impact of the reduced energy costs. And I don't know within your cost model how impactful those energy costs really are. They obviously they're not based anymore on the cost of diesel fuel, but they're the cost of natural gas. And I don't know how much natural gas has gone down in relationship to what it was prior, but the question itself, I think, is a good one, and so that we understand both the positives and the negatives as it applies to recycling.
Mayor?
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, that's fine. In order to keep this thing moving along so we don't spend all night on it, I would make a motion that we go with option D. And my basis of doing that is, number one, they have never ever come to us with a cost decrease when things have gone down, but they do have a habit of coming back to us periodically asking to modify and rework the contracts that we've entered into. The numbers they've given to us, the only way we can give them a cost increase is using the numbers that they have created and they've put together. And I don't know that I feel comfortable saddling the voters with a cost increase based upon numbers they've put together unless they're audited somehow and we have somebody go through the books and try and figure out just what the heck these numbers really are. Third, they're going to get, it looks like, as I was calculating it, a 56-cent increase no matter what. If we don't do anything, if we vote with option D, they still get the 56 cents that they're going to get. I would, this is what they're asking for is a relatively small increase I'd heard mentioned before, but we've had a history of denying abilities to make small tax increases on our citizens. One of them was recently with a gas or utility tax that we were able to increase because everybody else was doing it and the law was changed. And it was going to bring in a few $1,000s, and we said, no, we're not. We've had kind of a no tax increase situation. And I struggle with this because it's really nothing more than a tax increase of sorts. I can't vote in favor of this in any way, shape, or form. They're going to get their 56 cents. That's the deal. I would like their contract's over within about 10 months. At the speed that government works, I would like to see our staff, most of them are working from home, they probably have some time to do some of this stuff, put together the package, and let's go out to bid. If we start working on it right now, we go out to bid sometime early next year. It takes us a couple of months to process it, to get something done. If we started right now, we got maybe a few extra months to kind of get this done and to see what it looks like.
Well, that's that is not something that's on the agenda for tonight, but I will take the motion for option D, which is to maintain the terms of the current contract, which would be 85% of CPI increase. Is there a second for that motion?
Mr. Mayor, this is Tom. I second that motion.
Okay, is there further discussion from the council? See any hands up or not? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded to go with option D, which is to stay with the terms of the current contract and an 85% of CPI increase only. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Brainerd did as well.
Aye, that was an aye from Councilman Brainerd.
Yes.
All right. All those who oppose the motion, please signify by saying nay. Seeing no nays, that it carries unanimously, and we will stay with the 85% of CPI.
So thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council for your time tonight, and appreciate it. And stay safe and healthy there.
And the same for you, Clark. I do want to say that you guys are, I think you've done a great job in servicing our community. As one of your customers, I have no complaints with the service that you guys have provided. So thank the guys who actually work in the city, and we appreciate the professionalism with which they approach their jobs.
Certainly will, and during these unprecedented times, Mayor, with the with COVID, we've been able to continue with uninterrupted services. So I will certainly pass that along to the drivers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
can we?
Hey, man, I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Maybe at some future council meeting to have an agenda item as to whether to go out to bid on this?
I don't know that we really need to have an agenda item, but I will discuss that with the city manager. He may well just be able to take direction from staff or direction from the council that you'd like to see some bids before we decide on whether to exercise our option to renew for another year.
I would like to have some more input too, but okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, that takes us to agenda item B, which is the award and distribution of CARES Act funding. It's I think one of our first, if not the first, presentation from our new Director of Finance, Paige Peterson. Paige, are you there? There you are.
I'm here. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council.
You have to turn your volume up. Or maybe Terry needs to turn your volume up. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's low.
It's low. Okay.
There you go. That's better.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. It's very good to be here and to be a part of the Litchfield Park team, and nice to meet you all virtually, and really looking forward to meeting you all in person someday when it's safe to do that. So tonight we have before you the award and distribution of our CARES Act fund. The CARES Act funding, it's federal revenue that was passed down through the state, and Litchfield Park's CARES Act payment, it was established by the state and based on our population in the amount of $738,895. And so the intent of these funds is to help local governments with the revenue loss that some have experienced, and the uncertainty moving forward of what could happen with COVID-19. There are some other cities and towns that are keeping these funds. They're retaining them to help with lost revenues. However, we at Litchfield Park, we've been very fortunate that we haven't felt some of the impacts that some of the other cities and towns have. However, we just don't know moving forward what this can do. This isn't a situation where we can look back in the past and see what was done before. So there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding this. However, other cities have made plans to award some of these funds to local businesses. They've established business assistant grants. So that's also something that you as the council could consider if you would like to do that. I do have a sales tax update through June, so this will be the full year. If I could share that with you real quick. So this is the month of June here. You can see that our retail sales tax over June of last year had a 47% increase. However, there were some timing issues in here. So I think it's more important to really focus on the fiscal year to date number, which is 22% over last year in retail. But you can see some of our other businesses, restaurants, bars, rentals, and other have all seen a decrease. In total, our ongoing revenues are 22% over last June, and year to date, we are 10% higher than last year. So we are in a really good and fortunate situation compared to some of the other cities and towns in Arizona. And our construction sales tax, it's also up 11% over last June. And in total year to date, we are 18% over in construction. One second. I wanted to just briefly go over our online sales tax collections because this is something new for Arizona. Total from November when the sales tax collection began through the end of the year, we've collected $209,000. So that certainly helped with our year-to-date revenues. And very briefly, I believe Lars has have presented this to you in the past, what we thought the COVID impact might do to our revenues. It certainly didn't hit us as hard as we had anticipated. We had budgeted 6.5 million. Our estimate before the COVID began was just under 6.9, and we ended up collecting just under 6.9. So basically we came in right in where the early projections were. So with that, staff recommends the approval of the CARES award. So we can receive that $738,000. We do recommend that this is possibly used as a safeguard for potential lost revenues in the future. But like I said earlier, you certainly can choose to appropriate these funds for local business assistance. If you do decide to allocate a portion of that, we would recommend that we come back to you at a future meeting after we've done some research to recommend a program that will establish and define the criteria for the application and award before we would open that up to the public. And the financial impact of that is the $738,000. The way the grant worked is it was for public safety costs. So we had to submit to the state our contract costs with MCSO and Goodyear Fire. So even though we'll be receiving the just under $739,000, we actually spend just over $1 million during this same time period. The breakdown is on the council communication, or if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to help you answer those.
Just one quick question before we open it up to the council. None of this $738,000 has been booked into revenue at this point. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was included in the budget, but right. It's not in any projections right now.
It's not in your June numbers.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So do we have questions? And this has got two separate issues, just so that before we get down the road too far, we're going to break it into two separate motions and two separate votes so that everybody's clear on it. The first question is, do we want to accept these funds? And I would like to have your comments restricted to that to start with, so we can decide that we want to keep the funds. Do we want the funds? And then we can have a motion to accept the funds and direct staff to go do what needs to be done to obtain the funds. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I may be a little confused as to why we would not want to take the funds. They don't come with a lot of strings.
I can't think of any reason why we would not want to do this, but we have to decide as a council that we're going to accept the funds. So
I move we accept the funds.
Is there a second? Second by Councilman Romack, it looks like. All right, is there any discussion on accepting the funds? If not, all those in favor of directing staff to take the necessary actions to accept the funds, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Lisa, did you vote?
I did. I said aye.
Okay. All right, so we have directed staff down to accept the funds. So now the question becomes, once we get the funds, we have one side of the spectrum is that we retain the funds in our reserve account for use by the city for whatever purpose we may have to use it. One of which would be, particularly if we saw a revenue decline over the next several months to a year, which is certainly a possibility given the impact that COVID-19 is going to have on the resort. I suspect that our revenues from bed tax certainly is going to be significantly impacted, and probably our revenues from their restaurant activities and their golf activities are going to be significantly impacted by COVID-19. How much of that we've seen, I don't know. It appears that it's significant, but that other things have covered for it. The other extreme is that we can decide to take this CARES Act money, $738,000, and use all of it to provide some benefit to our businesses or our residents, whether it's businesses that are struggling to survive or whether it's residents who are having difficulty paying rent or mortgage payments or utilities. So we have those two extremes. And so within that, we need to decide what we want to direct staff to do with these funds, and if it's beyond just putting them in the bank for now, then we need, I think, to wait long enough for the staff to go out and bring us back some ideas on how others are dealing with the money in terms of trying to assist their businesses or individuals in their community. So with that, I'd like to have comments. Mr. Vice Mayor, you look like you're ready.
Oh, thank you. Do we not have a pot of money available for rent assistance and other kind of assistance in some other pot somewhere?
We got some money in that was part of the CDBT or CDBG funding that provided us with money for PPE and some other specific things that we accepted and we're using. And there was a percentage of that pot that we're working, I think, through the county to provide assistance for utilities and possibly rent assistance. Matthew, do you have more information on that?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, Sonny. Sonny is the one who was involved in that?
Yeah, we have approximately $35,000 that can be used, but that is targeted for homeowners or renters that cannot meet their rent due to the COVID-19. Either they lost their job or for some other reason. It's not focused to businesses.
And their application is through the county, correct?
That's correct.
Well, the intent of this funds, I think, was given to us maybe to offset funds that we had lost so that we would continue to spend to kind of keep the economy rolling. So I'm struggling with the concept where we would just take the money and shove it in the bank and maybe build up our reserve and spend it 4 or 5 years from now. It would seem that, the money was given to us under the current theories that have been circling around with all kinds of money that's been given everywhere to kind of keep the economy rolling. Should we, and I throw that out just as a thought that maybe there should be some consideration to some portion of this money, and I wouldn't think it'd be a very large portion, be available to assist local businesses somehow. I'm not, and staff needs to work on this. I'm not sure that we just give it to them, but we support their businesses through things that maybe the city needs. Maybe the local tree trimmer is trimming trees. Things, maybe we need to do more streets or roads. We need to do some improvements, do something. But it would seem like we need to keep this money, if it was given to us to run it through the economy, it seems like we need to keep it running through the economy and not just sit on it. And maybe it's not all of it. And I don't think, I mean, from numbers that I've seen, it sounds like we've got an extra $300,000 that is coming to us through the new internet sales tax in this year. And our numbers don't look that bad. And part of the reason they don't look that bad is this path that we've been on for a number of years to increase the commercial as opposed to the residential uses in the town. And so we've had recently some commercial increases that have increased our bottom line. I mean, if we hadn't had those, we'd been impacted probably, severely. But I mean, I just throw that out to talk about discussion.
Councilman Donahue.
Okay, I have a quick question. Oops, I'm sharing the internet with Mr. Claire, actually. Can you hear me?
Yes, you got a little bit of feedback, probably because you got too many mics on.
So how do our citizens or our businesses know about this? How do they know about this?
I suspect they know very little about it, but I don't know that for a fact. It is, it's money that's been talked about, through various news articles and news type things. I don't know whether our allocation has been in, much of a news item one way or the other. So I don't know how much the citizens really know about it. To go back to maybe to answer a question that the vice mayor raised, the money was really supposed to be for replacing. It had two purposes. The major purpose was to replace lost revenue that the city experienced because of having our businesses shut down and having a lack of sales tax. It was also supposed to help cover the extra costs that the city incurs in trying to continue to do business during the COVID times, which means the purchase of PPE by the city for its own employees, various extra costs we have of dealing with trying to do business in the pandemic. And then finally, it was supposed to provide a fund so that the city would be able to retain its employees. One of the worst things that can happen to our economy is if all the local governments lay off 25% of their people, because local government is such a large employer of people in our economy. So part of it was supposed to help make sure that we protected the jobs of city workers. And then finally, the final thought was that if there was money left over, that we also have businesses that may need assistance and that may not have been able to obtain assistance through some other path. So there were obviously paths put out for various businesses, both large and small, to obtain assistance from the federal government. But many of our businesses either don't understand how to use them or didn't use them or didn't do it quickly enough, at least in the case of some of the first programs. So it was supposed to help potentially in those areas as kind of like a final item. So there were a lot of purposes, and we have a lot of discretion on how we use these funds. Councilor Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Paige, welcome to Litchfield Park. We're glad to have you with us. I'm thinking that we as a council aren't going to come together and figure out what's going to be spent. But it would seem to me that someone like Paige and Matthew and maybe Bill get together and Sonny and put together a plan or a check with the various businesses and see what their needs might be and see how we can apportion this to the various places that it needs to go. But for right now, I think we can talk about it, but I don't see us settling on anything. Thank you.
That's kind of one reason why we split it into two questions. Just a thought. Miss City Attorney, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. I'm going to apologize ahead of time to Paige because I was talking to Matthew about the CARES Act funds. as I read the contract, there are limitations on what you can use the funds for. What happens is when you use CARES Act funds for things that are permitted under the contract, the public health and safety payroll expenses and things like that for the city, that frees up other city funds. Those are just general fund funds. And those are the funds that can be used or have been discussed to be used for to assist businesses and well, local businesses. My concern and the question that's been raised and the advice that we've been giving our clients is that you can spend that we call it freed up funds, which are really general funds for economic development purposes. And I've always been of the position that you can use general funds, city funds, for serious health and safety purposes. So I think there's a lot of flexibility, but I think that these funds have to be carefully accounted for, and that we avoid gift clause problems with the use of the freed up funds. So I think there's more discussion. Perhaps I could work with staff, but there's more discussion to be had regarding how it's all structured. I think you get there in the same manner, but I think there are some restrictions on how you use this money.
The city attorney's point is well taken. These funds actually were heavily restricted when everything started out. And initially it looked like Litchfield Park was going to get very few funds because there was a requirement from the federal government that the money be used for very strictly regulated purposes. And those purposes were ones that Litchfield had very few extra expenses in, or could show only a small amount of damage. But as the various discussions were had at the local and the state level, that the program was way too complicated and would be very difficult for local governments to be able to benefit, the state government decided that instead of following those very strict guidelines, and they got a waiver, I think, through the federal government that allowed them to base the distributions on costs of certain public safety items. So for cities and towns, we were allowed to become reimbursed for the cost of our fire department, the salaries in our fire department, and the salaries for our police officers. And for us, that meant we actually could become reimbursed for the salaries of Goodyear's fire department and the county's police department, which we pay through our contract. So technically the money that we're coming in, that we have, the $738,000, it will be spent, and Paige, you'll have to keep track of that. It will be spent for the contracts that we have with Goodyear and with the county. That in turn will free up other money, and that was always the purpose of doing it this way, was that will free up other money in our budget that we would have spent on those items that we can use for different things. And so we still have to be careful with the gift clause, but everything that I have understood from the state was that the gift clause, and this includes the Attorney General of state, the gift clause would not prohibit us from benefiting local businesses if we could show that the benefit was needed because of impacts of the COVID-19 crisis.
Agree.
So, and just one more comment, because I hope we're not going to be here all night on this. Councilman Romack is correct. We're not going to come up with a plan on how to do this tonight, but I'd like to get enough input from the council so staff can hear what people are thinking, and then we'll send staff back to try to work on it. The first step in that process was to get the survey done that the assistant city manager presented to you earlier. So now we have at least a basis of communication with our businesses where maybe we can start identifying what might be a good idea for us to consider. Doesn't mean we're going to do it, but at least we can have staff take a look at what the possibilities are. So with that, Councilman Rostosi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just my 2 cents. I think we're far too early in this whole process for us to be thinking about or making any decisions. It's not at all unreasonable, I don't think, that we could be facing our businesses shutting down again in the months ahead, as many California businesses are now shutting down again. So I personally feel like we have way too much uncertainty as far as our tax revenue expectations for fiscal 2021 to be doing anything to give away money this early in the game. So there's my 2 cents.
Right. Other input from the council? Councilman Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be something that we could reach out to the local businesses, maybe the dine-in restaurants and other issues that we know are having issues, and see what type of needs they might have so that we could put something together if we have these funds available, if it's something to just not promising anything, but just try to get an idea of what the needs might be within our local community to see what we can put together as this extends, because it does seem to be extending and we've got to be prepared for everything.
I think the challenge, Councilman Clare, is I think we all understand that the challenge is we are very early in this process. We have a minimum of another 6 months to figure out what happens as we get into the winter flu season and understand its impact on our hospitals and what businesses are able to do with. We don't understand yet the impact of whether the masks will make a difference in hospitalizations, although some of the preliminary data says that it is having a positive impact. So we have a lot of things that we need to learn. I think at this point we need to take a look at what the possibilities are and try to come up with some creative ideas. Because I'll tell you, quite frankly, $738,000 is a drop in the bucket in terms of what some of these businesses are feeling in terms of financial impacts over even over a 3 or 4 month period of time. So it isn't like we are not going to have the ability to save the world, but we may have the ability to put together a program that could help people in some ways, and that's the challenge for us going forward, is to try to figure that out and see what the possibilities are. And as we do that, it'll give us some time to see what happens with the impact of COVID on our operations over the next 6 or 8 weeks.
Mayor, I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Yes, please do.
I'd really like to see us seek out those businesses that we know suffered, and I'm thinking of like nail salons, beauty salons. The Wigwam did, but I really want us to, if we do this, I'd like us to seek out those particular types of businesses that didn't really have, you can't come and get curbside nail service, and I know that it really affected them dramatically. That's my first comment. Seek them out and see what we can do to help them. I'd also like to see us make it be an application process where they provide us some level of detail in terms of revenues. We've just filed taxes for this year. I don't imagine many of them have completed taxes since this will follow in the next year, but some way that we can monitor and make sure that we're getting funds to the right people is going to be really important. And then my third comment would be, let's look into our city employees, like the rec employees, the ones that we would have hired as summer help, and make sure that if there's any way we can, in any way that they were injured in terms of financially, that we make that good, because a lot of those kids use that money for college and things like that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Don't see any other hands. Anybody else have? If not, Mr. City Manager, do you have enough input you can try to take this back and see what kind of soup you can make out of this stew?
So to recap, you've already voted and approved accepting the funds, and now we need to go back and come up with a way to determine how to divide those funds up when council decides to divide.
I think we need to, what we're asking for is some ideas from council from staff on the best way to use the funds, not necessarily dividing them up, although that may be one of the paths. We want you to go back and take a look at our budgets and our revenue streams and how much risk are we at in those things, assuming that we might have to go through a shutdown again. What does that mean to the city? Because the first obligation we have is to make sure that the city is able to function and that our employees are protected. Right. And then, beyond that, given the number of businesses that we have here, and even if we were going to take $738,000, I think you said you had 88 businesses, Matthew?
We sent an email out to 90 businesses, sir, and 40 of them responded.
All right, so if it's 90 businesses, you don't even have $10,000 per business, which, $10,000 might be very, very significant to the hair salon, but $10,000 isn't going to make any difference to the wigwam. Correct. So it's not a simple question, and I think it's, we need staff to take a look at it and see what ideas you may have, and then we can bring it back for another discussion with council. I think probably at least one more discussion before we would ever get to the point of having an action item.
Mayor, can I bring up one more thought?
Yes. Yes, Councilman Brainerd Watson, go ahead.
Sorry, Matt, can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay, I'd like us maybe to approach the school district as well and see if, they're going to have huge needs in terms of PPE as they start opening for the school year. I know we only have Litchfield Elementary in our attendance or in our actual city, but maybe Millennium too, probably. But I do think we should look and see if there's any thing we can do to help them as well.
Okay, we'll take that input. Anything else from council? If not, we're going to move on then to item C, which is the streetlight improvement districts 1, 2, and 3 ad valorem tax levy. Paige, do we have a presentation?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a presentation, just a brief discussion, if that's okay. Setting the tax levies it's a 3-stage process, and you've already gone through step 1, which was to adopt the tentative budget. Step 2 was the public hearing and the final budget adoption. And now we're at step 3, the final stage. So this resolution will adopt the tax levy for the street lighting districts 1, 2, and 3. There's been no change to the rate as it was presented to you at the June 17th meeting. The street lighting district 1 is located in the village at Litchfield Park, encompassing the southern village area. Number 2 encompasses the central area of the city, including the resort, central businesses, and a large portion of the central residences. Number 3 is also located in the village at Litchfield Park, encompassing the northern village area. So all property owners within each district are collectively assessed each year to cover the cost to operate the lights within their district. Then Arizona Public Service Company will bill us for the cost of the lighting. There is no cost to the city. The assessments do cover 100% of the expenditures of the district. We do have a target fund balance buffer of 5% of the annual expenses to ensure the districts can all cover their respective expenditures. The rates and the levy are included in the documents. I can go over those if you'd like, but there has been no.
It's not necessary, I don't think, unless we have a council member who has a question. We've been through this multiple times. It's a zero-sum game where we spend a certain amount of money for electricity and maintenance, and then that money is placed back into this SLID tax so that we get the money back. And we set these rates every year, and they adjust every year based upon the actual expenditures within each SLID. Are there questions from the council about the process or what we need to do at this point, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Susan, we had this conversation. I don't remember the answer. If there's a method so that all of our citizens are taxed equally and this turns into just one SLID.
Did have this conversation and I tried mightily. It was going to take some legislation And I tried with with Surprise and another city to get legislation passed to enable the consolidation of SLIDs. I think, as I recall, it's been 3 or 4 years, but I think there was legislation passed, but it's virtually useless. The procedures are virtually useless. I think it's a petition process as opposed to the city being able to do it. So it's virtually useless. So I have no way to advise you how to consolidate these SLIDs.
Thank you.
Unless you want to go a petition process, which will not work.
Especially right now.
Yeah. Just assume we cannot consolidate the SLIDs. This is something that's been talked about for many, many years, and there's just not support to easily do that. We don't know for sure when we look at these rates exactly how much difference it makes, because you've got different factors in here. One very large part of which is the property valuations within each district. So, you know, the SLIDs are what they are, and quite frankly, I don't know that I've ever had a resident even ask me about SLIDs. So, any other comments or questions from council?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, it's motion to adopt resolutions 20-474, setting the tax levy for fiscal year 2021 for SLID 1, SLID 2, and SLID 3 as presented in your council packet. Is there a second?
Second by Brainerd.
Okay, we have a second by Councilwoman Brainerd. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Brainerd, how do you vote?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Takes us now to the virtual public hearing and public hearings during summer months. This is item number D, and again, this is another item that really is two different items, and so we're gonna tackle them separately so that we have a chance of getting this done in an efficient manner. First question is going to be the scheduling of public hearings during the summer months. Historically, the council has not scheduled anything significant, any type of significant business during July and August. August, typically we would not meet, because in most years, August is when the League of Cities and Towns convention is. And so a good number of our council will participate in that convention, and so they're not available for a meeting. We also typically do not have anything of high importance to the community in the month of July, because many of our residents are just simply not here. And our July meeting ends up oftentimes being moved around, so it's not always the same date as it would typically be. That's been an informal process. It was called into question in terms of whether it was really a policy or not by Sun Health. So rather than have some dispute over whether it was a policy or not a policy, or just a procedure that we had informally followed, I elected to bring it to council and let the council decide what you want to do during July and August. My recommendation to you is that we do what we have done in the past, because it has worked fine. And that is that major issues that impact our community that we believe we should have input from the community, that we don't schedule those for action or public hearings during July and August. So that's the proposal. I'd like to have comments from the council, and we'll decide if there's support. We'll adopt it as a procedure or policy going forward. Councilman Donahue. Councilman Donahue, go ahead.
So I guess what I wanted to find out is, do we have any people that maybe would have had this happen in April or May that now would be June and July, because we have such a different situation now? That are we putting people off 4 months? I don't know. If there was, if there were things on the docket for April and May that didn't happen. So I don't know. I mean, we are in a very different situation. I think more people are home now. I'm just saying, if there's things that should have been done in April and May, maybe we need to look at July and August. Just throwing that out.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Councilman Mostosi.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I understand in general the thought behind not doing stuff in July and August because we have a lot of people not here. But this year in particular, nobody's going to physically be present anyway. So they don't have to be here home to participate. They could be participating from Minnesota or wherever they might be, or San Diego, wherever they might be in July and August. So I guess I'd be hesitant. I think it's probably a good understanding, but I'd be hesitant to have it be as a policy because I think in this particular year, it doesn't really make sense. It might have made sense last year. It might or might not make sense next year.
The question is really a separate question from how people will participate. That's a question we're going to discuss in a minute in terms of how people might participate. The question is whether we think it's good policy not to let applicants know ahead of time that we're not going to schedule substantive kinds of public hearings or substantive kinds of votes that have significant potential to impact the community. We're not going to do that during July and August unless there's some really overriding issue that absolutely requires it. This has been an odd year in that everything has been disrupted starting about the 1st of March. So March, April, May, June have all been disrupted because of the COVID-19 crisis. So in looking at the policy, I think you need to divorce this policy from what actually happened this year because hopefully we're not going to be going through this type of situation again where we've had so many different things that have just been devastated. This is a question really a more general policy. So, Councilmember Stosi.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think you misunderstood me. My understanding would be that the point of the policy is that typically in July and August, either we as a council aren't very accessible or our citizens aren't very accessible because a lot of us are gone.
Correct.
Which I think historically that reason for having such a policy would make sense. I think my point was that this year, either we're not gone or we are meeting virtually. And if we're meeting virtually, then where we are physically existing, whether it's in Litchfield Park or anywhere else in the world, actually doesn't matter because we're meeting virtually. So as a result, and I think it's highly questionable at this point what next July and August will look like, whether we'll be back to normal or we'll be still in a virtual world. So I think at this point, it doesn't make sense to have a policy when we could still be doing things virtually next July and August. And then if we're virtual, there's no reason to be limiting public hearings.
All right. Any other comment from council? All right. Is there a motion that anyone from the council wishes to make concerning the holding of public hearings and other meetings that have significant potential community impact or community interest during the months of July and August in the future?
Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was trying to say, yes, I'd like to make a comment as well. That I agree a lot with Tom, that making this a policy may not be a good idea moving forward. I'm not only just looking at this particular instance, but also as we move into developing the city center, we may have something come up that the timing of a hearing is going to be really important for a business that's trying to build in that area. And if we're locked in by a policy that we don't meet during those months, I think we're potentially hamstringing ourselves or someone else who might want to be doing something in terms of development there. So
the policy does not prevent the council from meeting. It just states what the general approach that we're going to have. To the extent that the council has things that it must do, we can always have a special meeting. Many of you don't remember, or maybe not even were here. We've had situations in the month of July where we can't even get a quorum So it is not been, it's not always an easy task to bring the council together, much less bring the community together during the month of July. And the month of August, just quite frankly, is in a normal situation, is not, other than a special meeting, the month of August does not work for any type of meetings because there's not a quorum of the council to meet. Councilman Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Ann. I would happen to agree with Tom. I think it makes it instead of a policy that it's just maybe a recommendation, but I would like to see us, and I'll make the motion that we move forward with our continue our meetings on the third Wednesday of the month, just moving forward. And if we don't need to meet, that's fine. But for right now, as long as it's virtual meetings, it doesn't matter whether we're in Utah, Mexico, or wherever. We're still able to put together. And the quorum issue, I think, is almost a moot point when we're doing it virtually anyway. It's when you try to get everybody together over at the library, that does become way more problematic. So I would make a motion that we continue our meetings.
And that's fine. I think you're getting it's confused when you look at the issue of virtual versus just meetings. We've had virtual meetings now for 4 months. We have had zero participation by the public in these meetings, which is not, is not surprising. We used to have regular attendance by a variety of people in the public to our meetings that are held in person, but literally we have no public participation in these meetings now that they're being done virtually. So while we can meet, and we certainly are meeting the letter of the law with these meetings, we are not necessarily meeting the needs of our community because they just are not participating. And if there's an issue, now maybe if there's an issue that they feel is important enough that they'll start coming, I don't know. But I have my doubts, having attended some virtual meetings that had significant public interest at the county level, and the meetings were at best a compromise that met, again, it met the letter of the law, but it certainly didn't meet the spirit of providing for adequate public opportunity to participate. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the motion that was made was to.
Well, first, we need to, let's restate the motion and then see if we have a second.
Can I address that before we do that?
No, we need to follow the Robert's rules, at least to some extent. There's a motion on the table. Can you restate the motion, and then we'll see if there's a second for it, and then we can discuss that motion.
Yeah, my motion would be that we continue our meeting schedule as we've been doing it throughout the year. That we continue the third, I believe it's the third Wednesday of every month. We just continue on with that and see what happens.
Is there a second for that motion?
No.
Okay, having no second, then we'll have just open discussion again. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And the reason that I don't think we need that motion that John had made is we've got a rule already in place to hold those meetings on those dates. We just come in on a yearly basis and try and move or work or tweak that August meeting and sometimes the July meeting, depending on what's happening with all of us and all of our staff and everything. And then the second thing is the agenda item deals with virtual public hearings. It doesn't deal with our regular city council meetings. But I think, Mayor, what you're asking is maybe not so much for a formal policy that says absolutely we don't do public hearings in July and August, but the ability for our staff to tell anybody who's expecting to push a public hearing in July or August that it's going to be difficult to get that thing done in July or August because council members are on vacations, we're gone, city staff are gone, they're on vacations, our citizens are gone, and we go into slow motion kind of in July and August. But is that where you're trying to go with this?
It's not, it isn't that they can never happen. It's simply to let people know that in July and August, depending upon the issue in July and August, that the city does not favor public hearings on controversial or potentially controversial issues during July and August. And we have done that in the past as we've had amendments to our general plan and that impacted things that many citizens were interested in. We did not hold public hearings on those in July and August for those because there's so many people gone. So
the
it's
entire
not,
city center planning, that was all put on hold.
Policy. What's that?
The entire city center planning was all put on hold in July and August because there wasn't
Correct.
anybody around to listen to it. Yeah.
And it's just, it makes sense because for anything that has significant impact on our residents or potentially a significant impact on our residents. Councilman Donahue.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in all years but now. And my concern still is that if, and I'm not sure who determines which virtual meetings will be controversial or not, because I think we have an opportunity now to offer a customer service to our citizens. We're small, and just like your letter for masks go out, we can send information out on a virtual meeting easily for this July and August. So maybe what we need to talk about is this is a different situation, and I agree with Tom, than next year. So my concern is I don't know who's out there, but there might be some people out there, maybe April, May, and you know what? I think that we could provide good customer service if we just, this is a different year. I don't know many people that are on vacation, and citizens, as you said, hardly anybody may attend anyway. So if this can help move things forward for some groups, maybe that's what we should do. So make this different than next year. I don't know. I just hate to make us to continue what we did in the past for what we might do next year, because this year is a complete different ballgame.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would agree with what Ann's saying. I also would like us to, try and see if there's a way of figuring out how many people tuned in and watched this on YouTube or watched it later. It'd be nice to have an idea, what our reach really is with these, because even though they're not commenting, they may be watching.
And whether we have a way to do that or not, I don't know. Quite frankly, if they watch it, that's wonderful. But if we want to provide an opportunity for our citizens to have input, then they have to make comments or we're making decisions, without the benefit of that input. And I'm fine if you want to say that you're going to schedule meetings, normally, and not take into account the fact that normally we have not scheduled July and August, but now that we're in an unusual circumstance and we're trying to use virtual meetings, that we should, just look at that as what we're going to do forever. That's fine too. It seemed to me that it would be better practice to be able to have the planning department give direction to people so they understood that July and August was a difficult time. But if council does not want to do that, that's fine. And we'll move on to the discussion of whether you want to use virtual meetings for all types of public hearings in terms of that as a policy. So at this point, we'll move on, since there doesn't seem to be a sense of council to make a change in terms of anything that we would take a vote on. And that's to the second question of holding public hearings by Zoom or other remote strategies. What I have told the staff was that we wanted to start using Zoom and try to understand how we would use the technology and see if it worked in the setting of council meetings. And we have gotten through that over the last several months to the point where we can function as a council, whether it's at a high level or not, is I think there's some question in my mind, but at least we're functioning well, and that's good. We've also used it, I think, for some commission meetings, and I believe that has functioned also. So now the next step is to see how public hearings would work within within the Zoom world or the virtual world. As an interim step, we are going to have some hearings on variances before the Design Review Board that will be coming up over the next month or so that staff is working on now, so that we'll have the ability to see how a variance hearing goes at design review and see, in a situation again where normally we don't have a lot of public input, it should work fine. The question then becomes public hearings, and what I had suggested to staff was that we would start with public hearing by P&Z and see how it worked. See if we were able to get any comments from, did we have anybody from the public participate? And by participate, I mean, did they come to the meeting virtually? And then did they submit or otherwise put questions into the meeting? Do we have a way to do that? Right now, we're limiting public to making comments only by sending in a written comment to the clerk prior to the meeting. So they can't really make comments in the same way that they would make it in a public meeting. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do that within the public hearing context, and that's something that we have to answer, and we'll try to work through that with P&Z. But so the question, I guess, to council isn't so much it isn't something you have to take action on, but it's something where you need to understand what the city is doing, what path are we on, trying to find out whether the public hearings can be done. And if they can be done, how do we set them up in a way that we try to get comments from our citizens so that they can make them as much like they would make them in a public meeting as possible. And that process, unless there's heartburn on the council, it will start with the process of scheduling a P&Z public hearing in September, first part of September. So, Councilman Donahue.
So I'm just curious, like I participated today in a big Zoom conference where there were 100 people on Zoom, and there was a moderator, and you were able to submit questions, and the moderator then read the questions right then. So there is a way to do that, and it's not very difficult. And then for just like a town hall when we used to do it, then for whatever questions they didn't get to in the allotted time, they answered later. But I think we now have a mode of communication to our citizens, and we just have to make sure whether we use the newspaper, we use email to let them know what's happening, and then set it up that way. I think every one of us has probably been in one of those Zooms where you have a moderator and questions can be submitted right then and they're read right then. It doesn't have to be done before. So just a suggestion.
There may very well be opportunities for that to work. Whether we have the ability and the technology within the city to do it is another question. It's something that we will explore. Councilmember Stolze.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my perspective would be that when all this started and we went to virtual meetings, I think we all thought it was a short-term thing. And I think right now, just my personal opinion would be, I would be shocked if we were meeting in person again before the first of the year at the earliest, and it might be longer than that. I think in all fairness, it is time for us to transition to a point where we can do all the city's business and not have stuff on hold because we're only meeting virtually. So my own 2 cents would be, we just have to figure out how to do public hearings virtually, because it doesn't make sense for us to not do any public hearings until we can meet in person again, because who knows when that's going to be.
And I don't disagree with that position, Councilman Stolze. I just think we need to do it in a step-by-step process so that we try to allow our staff and to grow as it needs to grow so that we're able to deal with it. We don't have an IT department. We don't have some of the backup that you would have in larger organizations. So this process is not going to be as quick for the city as it might be if you were in the city of Phoenix or in the county. Yes, Councilmember Stolze.
Just a follow-up thought. I, like Ann, have participated in some large group discussions where we texted in or chatted in our questions. And in my case, the moderator then unmuted and turned on whoever was asking the question so we could actually ask our own question verbally on the Zoom meeting. I'd be happy to put you or Terry or Bill or whoever in touch with the people who do that. They could at least tell you how they do that. I know they do it through Zoom.
Yeah, that is actually a feature that I've seen used also, but it's a feature that evolved over the last 6 weeks. When some of this, because I've been in some very, very large Zoom meetings, and at first there was no ability to ask any questions during the meeting. And then there was a period of time where you would send in questions ahead of time, and those were done during the meeting. Lately, there has been some limited ability for people to simply raise their hand and be recognized. Generally, it's by calling a number actually and getting yourself in a virtual line, which then later they're able to recognize that. And those are things that we need to learn how to do. And that's the purpose. The purpose of having a P&Z public hearing to start with is to try to start figuring those kind of things out. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the mayor and Councilman Rostosi. We need to sort of move ahead here and trying to figure out how to do this and get everybody trained. One of the things I would like, though, as to our city clerk or whoever's setting these meetings up, is to give maybe a little bit of extra notice to, at least I would like it, maybe the other council members would like it also, so that we know when the design review board meetings are going to be held, when the P&Z meetings are going to be held. And I would like to sit back and watch and observe and just see how this is all going. And I probably get those now, but it's not triggered to me enough to pick up on it, and I'll pay more attention. But if somebody could just make me pay attention, I would appreciate that, because I want to see how it works with P&Z and with design review.
It's a good idea because the design review one is just being set up now, and I'm not even sure what the dates are. So, it would be a good idea for staff to send out some special notices to all council so we understand when these Zoom public hearings are going to be held, so we can camp on and see how it goes. Watch it directly.
And it might be a way for us to get a little bit more knowledge about what's going on with these different commissions and stuff. It's just easier to do that online than it is to go to the meeting.
Any other comments? Councilman Clare.
Freeze up.
You're on, Councilman Clare, but we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just thinking that we might be able to just send out a calendar request for every one of these meetings, just like we do for city council, and just have it added to our calendars. And if we decide to log in, we get in. Seems like a pretty simple send.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Stevens.
This would be a question for our city attorney. Although they are virtual, is there any quorum open meeting law impact relative to 4 or more members of council virtually attending a P&Z or a DRB or any other type of meeting? Do we have to notice that? Just a thought.
No, it's an excellent thought because we've discussed this with in-person meetings. As long as the quorum is sitting there and doesn't say anything, you're okay. So what's hard sometimes is for the council not to say anything, but that's when you get into your problems of whether you're having a meeting or having a discussion with a quorum there. That's a meeting. But as long as they're just listening and not saying anything, they're fine.
So we'll keep them on mute.
And that would work really well. I do have one question. I know Pam is looking for some direction and setting. She's got several hearings that are going to be coming up. And I know she's looking for direction. And I heard the mayor saying P&Z in September. Is that the direction to Pam, or is there something else? I wasn't sure if that was the direction.
That was the direction that I had given her in the past, and it's subject to modification if the council wants to somehow move that up. We have a variety of things that need to be accomplished before we actually do that public hearing. including things like how do we make it as convenient as possible for comments to be made if we have any comments. And we have various notice requirements that are part of state law before we can have a public hearing. So both of those things, I think with the notice requirements, I don't know that we could even have a public hearing prior to sometime in late August. So the 1st of September seemed like a reasonable date for staff to work towards.
So, question.
Councilman Dodd.
So, does that mean there will not be a P&Z meeting until September, or?
No, there won't be a public hearing.
Oh.
Public hearings have special notice, and you have to go through a period of time. And you got to post it, and I don't know what all the requirements are, but I know that if you wanted to have a public hearing today, I don't know that you could have it before the 3rd or 4th week in August. It's just from noticing standpoints, what the staff has to get done before you're able to have it, able to actually hold it. So I had given them a target of sometime working with P&Z and setting a date sometime in early September, so that number one, we can get the technology as good as we can get whatever IT support we have to do to make the Zoom meeting work as well as it can possibly work in that setting. And then also get all the public hearing or public notices out so that we can conduct it legally.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, yeah, Mr. City Manager.
And Pam can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the P&Z meetings are the 2nd Tuesday of every month. So although we could have a special meeting, the next meeting that would give us enough timeline to notice for a public hearing would be the 2nd Tuesday in September, which I believe is September the 14th. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, so one of the meetings I was in yesterday was the Litchfield Elementary School District, and I really think for the size of us, it's just Zoom, and it's really not so I would love for our staff to check on that sooner rather than later, just for the opportunity to move forward. So, and like I said, it's been one yesterday and one today. So just wondering if that can move sooner rather than later.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. City Manager.
We can certainly look into that almost immediately in terms of what will it take for us to be able to hold public hearings of this sort. And we'll have to consider what additional costs there will be to pay for that service, if there's any additional bodies that need to be involved, et cetera. We can do that immediately. However, we can't actually hold a public hearing until we have enough time and given enough notice in order for it to be legal. And that would be, as you stated, Mr. Mayor, late August or early September. And unless there is a pressing need to do it in late August, I would simply recommend that it go with the normal P&Z meeting, which is in September, the 2nd Tuesday in September. Thank you.
Any other comments or directions from council? All right, seeing that, I think staff, you understand the direction council wants to go in on these topics, and I don't know if there's any action that's necessary. Go forth and find out what we have to do and take the steps that are necessary so that we can have the technology to conduct as effective a public hearing as possible. And then get the first public hearing scheduled within the P&Z area so that we can give it a try and see how it works.
Okay, I've got it. We'll move forward on that. Thank you.
All right, that takes us to business item E, resurfacing of basketball and tennis courts. Matthew.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor and Council, before we really get into this item, I would refer to Sonny for just a minute. He has some good news for us regarding this project. Sonny?
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Today at about 4 o'clock, I received word from David Swacky, who is with Kiwanis of Litchfield. I had spoken with him about the possibility of Kiwanis participating in some way as far as a donation goes to help resurface the basketball court and the tennis court because they were looking for a project. And today at about 4 o'clock, I received word that they have decided that they can contribute $10,000 to this project. And so that's almost half of the project. So that's good news if it is decided tonight that we can move forward with it.
What is the total cost of this? The total financial impact, you got 14,000. Or is it
It's just under 26,000, Mayor.
26,000? All right.
Just under.
So do you want to go ahead and make your presentation?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sonny. Mayor and Council, you'll see in your package you have two quotes. They're both for the courts that are at the rec center. One is for the basketball court, one is for the tennis court. Again, those projects together, one of them is 13,000 some change, one is 12,000 some change, for a combined total of roughly 25,900. As Sonny has said, Kiwanis is willing to contribute $10,000 toward this project, which again is almost half of it. That would take the city's balance to about 15.9. As far as the CIPs, one of these projects is on the CIP for FY21, while the other one is on the CIP list for FY22. So if Mayor and Council decide to move forward with this project, you would have to move one of those from FY22 to FY21, so we can do both of those. I do feel it would be a great time to do these projects. One, there's very little going on right now with rec, with COVID for obvious reasons. It'd be a great time to do these courts. Also, they're good prices. As you'll see, they both came in under bid as far as what we had allowed for in the CIP, so we are saving some money there. And they need to be done. The courts are getting to a point where they're dangerous. They need to be resurfaced. They're becoming trip hazards, etc. And it's just something we do every few years. I want to say Sonny had said every 6 to 7 years that we resurface these courts. Sonny could certainly talk about that more than I could. But again, I think it's a good thing to do. You would see the numbers in the council communication. This quote is through our Mojave contract through General Acrylics. The basketball courts would be for $13,476.09. And the tennis court would be at $12,424. The tennis court was in the CIPs for $18,000. So right there, we're looking at almost a $5,000 savings as far as what we'd allowed for. Again, if both projects are approved, we could get these scheduled. They would come in just under $26,000. Or with a generous contribution from Kiwanis, that would leave the city owing about $15,900. In your package, you'll see the items as far as the work that will be done, the thickness, the quality, et cetera, the contract. If you have any questions as far as this item, I'd be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Questions from the council or other comments? Oh, Mr. Vice Mayor, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you again, Mayor. Matthew, certain products, when they're applied to a hot surface and they dry quickly, do not bond very well. Has anybody looked into whether the end of July is a good time to apply this product?
Could I comment?
Please, I was going to ask you to.
Okay, yeah, this is actually done by a company that does these all the time. And this is actually with what they're going to be doing. They've indicated to us that this is a good time to do these things. They'd probably be working early in the mornings and so forth. But typically that's when we have had the courts done in years past. We haven't waited till the middle of the year when our season is high. We've actually done them in the summer when it was low participation in basketball or in tennis.
Are we getting, it seems like we do this quite often. Are we getting normal wear out of these courts? Lasting as long as they should?
Actually, we don't do them quite often. The basketball court was done years ago with a $35,000 grant called Sparks Park. Sprite Sparks Park. It was hard to say. That was done about almost 8 years ago. And that surface is really starting to wear the basketball. It just needs to be resurfaced. Tennis courts, about every 5 years is what we're seeing with the tennis courts. And so that's pretty much when we had them done last.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Donahue, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say kudos to Kiwanis. Once again, they're just incredible community partners. So just would love to say thank you to them.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? If not, is there a motion to approve the expenditure of funds to resurface the basketball and tennis courts using the gracious donation from Kiwanis to help pay for a good portion of the cost? Councilman Solsi.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by the Vice Mayor. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Any
you, Mayor,
opposed?
Council.
Councilman Brainerd Watson.
Aye.
All right. So the motion passes unanimously. We'll get get this resurfacing done. And very
Thank you.
effectively with the help of Kiwanis. Next item is a discussion over the Odyssey Preparatory Academy pool agreement. Matthew.
Yes, sir. Mayor and Council, this is an agreement we've had before. One thing I would point out on this, you may remember the pool is currently closed due to COVID-19 concerns. We did lay off our lifeguards last week. That being said, this agreement does not require lifeguards. This is for swim practices, not for swim meets. If there wasn't COVID right now, this agreement would be for swim practices and swim meets. However, because of COVID, it's not. It's only for swim practices. The reason I make that distinction is swim practices do not require lifeguards. Swim meets do. So as far as staff goes, we would have our regular manager, assistant manager there as far as they'd be there anyway. So it doesn't require lifeguards as far as this agreement. It would be for this fall, again, for swim practices a few days a week. Pays roughly $2,000 a month. And again, it's a good agreement. It's a local group, and it is an agreement we've had for years in the past. And I would recommend approval of this agreement.
Any questions from council? Councilman Romack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Matthew, I was reading through the document that we have, and it calls for a lifeguard there, one lifeguard there, according to that agreement. Is there a problem with that, or what's that about?
Now that may be from the meets. There shouldn't be a lifeguard there. It doesn't require one. So we would have the manager there and the assistant manager there. We will be sanitizing some equipment between swimmers, but it doesn't require a lifeguard to be on duty. I will look at the wording on that, but it doesn't require one to be there. But thank you for pointing that out, sir.
Sure.
Well, is there a motion to approve the use agreement between the city and Odyssey Prep Academy to use the pool between September 8th and November 4th without provision for a lifeguard? Councilman Clare.
I make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Brainerd Watson.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of entering into the use agreement, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Councilman Brainerd Watson, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right, ayes have it. We'll enter into the agreement. The next item of business is a discussion of a shared parking lot at Staggs Park. This is for direction of staff to begin discussions with St. Peter's on an agreement regarding a shared parking lot at the south end of Staggs Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Woody Scout and city engineer. During the June meeting, you gave us direction to go ahead and put up signs and paint red curbs in the area of the crosswalks on Old Litchfield Road, create no parking zones adjacent to those crosswalks. And I estimated that we will be losing about 14 parking spaces as a result of that. So it occurred to me that it might take a while to replace those spaces. So I thought it might be a good idea to bring to you tonight an option which has actually been kicking around for at least 10 years that I'm aware of, which is the shared parking between the church, Episcopal Church, and the city with a small parking lot that would have about 20 or 22 spaces in it that would straddle the property line between the church and the park. And I estimate that by the time that we enter into an agreement, get the plans done and get it constructed, it could be close to 10 months, 10 to 12 months to finish the project. So I wanted to bring it to you and see if the council had any interest in moving ahead in that direction.
Comments from council? Councilman Donahue.
Thank you. I just think it's an outstanding idea. We have talked about it for a long time. And the other reason I think we should do it is because it will certainly show our customers, our consumers, that we are paying attention to safety, that we're moving along. We've got a construction project happening and an important one. So I just want to say that I think it's a great idea and would love to see that happen.
Other comments? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Woody, will this parking affect the use of the park for baseball?
I don't believe so. It's, if I remember right, the baseball home plate, if you will, is in the northwest corner of the park. So this would be in the southeast corner. So it would, if it had any effect on it, it would be very little, but I don't know that offhand.
Okay. And then my other question was, if you put parking spaces on both sides, you still got to create the same driveway. Is there an economy of scale or a little bit of benefit to getting parking spaces on both sides of this driveway?
That's a possibility. We can certainly look at that.
And maybe they're not angle in, maybe they're parallel parking or something. And yes. I don't have any kind of idea how much of the park that would take up.
Yeah, that would be the issue is, obviously we're pretty tight up against the building there with the church. So if we widened it out, it would take room out of the park.
Can we get maybe a Google map or something with a quick line drawing on the top of it that shows how this layout would affect that park?
Sure.
Councilman Romack.
Paul, in your packet, you have a Google map, and you have a layout that shows I think the 20 spaces. It's like the last 2 pages of your packet. So yes, it is there.
It doesn't show the baseball diamond, doesn't show the entire park. It just shows part of it.
Okay, it was, yeah. If you walk over there, Paul, you'll see that basically that's just Little League. We're not getting into any sort of bigger kids. And no, they if they can hit it that far, good for them. They're headed for a real solid future. But no, there's a lot of soccer that goes on there. There's just a lot of activity in that park. And good for us. I'm glad to hear that. But the other side of it is that the traffic issue, this solves a big part of that traffic issue.
Well, I guess my question is, we're not really creating that many new spaces. We're trying to replace the ones that we took away and get a few more, but not that many. The way this affects the park, can we get a few more spaces out of it on the other side of that driveway? We got to build the driveway. The driveway is going to be a certain width, whether you put spaces on one side or the other side. Mm-hmm. We're not taking that much more land to put spaces on the other side also. And that would double up, or maybe not double, but it would give us maybe 40% more.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Paul, I drew this up, okay? This is an idea that we had when we first started on the program. And it's the idea there is that the driveway goes down, the middle of the driveway is the property line. So half of the driveway is on church property and half of the driveway is on city property. All of the parking is on city property. Now, if you want to move that whole thing further to the north, makes sense to me. And I don't think that would really cause major headache with anybody. It's just as long as we're able to accommodate getting out, and the getting out is across the church parking lot. And that does become, you have to, we have to have a right of way for that. Susan would be involved in.
Is there a reason why the yellow line doesn't go further to the south, closer to that blue, whatever that blue line is?
Mr. Mayor, the blue line is the building addition that the church installed, built a few years ago.
And so could you have angled parking that actually headed up close to, right close to that building?
Yes, we could, but as Councilmember Romack stated, we'd have to move it into the park a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit, but not very much.
Right.
Maybe 10 feet.
Yeah. So there's a variety of things that need to be taken into account as you start these conversations. So what you need from council is direction to start the discussions with St. Peter's Church.
Yes, sir.
So is there a motion to direct staff to start conversations with St. Peter's Church on the placement of a shared parking lot at the south end of Staggs Park?
So,
Mr. Mayor, before I do that, I think I need to recuse myself.
Okay. You shouldn't have spoken then. We'll strike your comments from the minutes. All right, so moved by the Vice Mayor to start conversations. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Donahue. Any further discussion by council? All those in favor of starting conversations with the church on a use agreement to build a shared parking lot, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Councilman Brainerd Watson, how do you say?
Aye.
Are there any nays? All right, let the record show that we had 6 voting in favor of starting conversations with 1 recusal. Next item of business is approval of the construction manager at risk for pre-construction services. Mr. Scouten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Given the lateness of the hour, I had about 4 minutes of presentation. I think what I'll do is just give you the highlights and then see if there's any questions. But the award of this pre-construction services contract is the next step in the process of designing and building the first phase of the city center infrastructure. And I think we've all talked about that as being the roundabout at the intersection of Litchfield Road and Village Parkway, extending Village Parkway into the city center, and then building the first phase of the park. So we've been underway for quite some time now, since February, with engineering and understanding where all the utilities are, doing some other things, and we've got engineering plans that are now about 50 to 70% complete. So what we want to do is bring on board our contractor through what's called the CMAR process, Construction Manager at Risk. And the way we do that is a 2-step process. The first step is the pre-construction services. And under that contract, we're basically paying the contractor to get familiar with the plans, review the plans, prepare cost estimates, help with phasing, looking at constructability, biddability, market conditions, costs, and so on, preparing cost estimates, preparing schedules, providing cost flow projections, and so on. So they're basically a member of our team. They're a partner with the city and with our engineer EPS group to finalize the design and work with us to make sure that the project fits into our budget. And the way that they do that is by giving us recommendations and looking at value engineering and so on. I think what I'll say is just that, I recommend that we use the CMAR process, and we've gone through a selection process over the last few months to recommend Aiken Gardner as our top ranked firm. They've given us what I think is a good proposal. And I'm recommending that we move ahead with awarding them the pre-construction services contract not to exceed $180,415.94.
To the extent that we decide to go forward on doing this, is the work that's being done, the work that has been done, and then the work that will be done under this this construction manager at risk process, will that work be effort that will be retained if we don't do this for an extra year or so? Because of
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as I was going to state, at the end of November, we will know exactly what this project is going to cost us, and we will have complete engineering plans. So we will be ready to go to construction end of November, sometime in December, but we don't have to go ahead at that particular time. It's, the council's choice to postpone it at that time, if you so desire. But none of that engineering and knowledge and cost estimating and all of that, none of that is really lost. We retain all that for when we begin to move ahead.
Okay, questions from council? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Woody, I don't quite understand still why we're hiring these guys for $180,000 and what we're getting out of it. They're going to just be looking over the plans and watching what all the guys that we've hired to design the project are doing, and maybe throw some input in there, and then we're going to pay them to put together a bid on the project. And why wouldn't that be done by our engineers? Why couldn't our engineers give us their estimates what it would cost to build this stuff?
Yeah, the engineers can give us the cost estimates all day long, but they don't count. We need to go, at some point, we need to go to a contractor and either go through a low bid process or go through something like the CMAR process. And the problem with the low bid process is that we don't always get the most qualified contractor. In fact, sometimes we don't, they're not very qualified at all. It's a low bid. So they're, by definition, they're going to be looking for ways to make up the difference between their bid and the next guy, the next higher bidder. And typically that ends up with change orders on low bid projects. And we end up in an antagonistic relationship with the contractor. So basically, under this process, the contractor is giving us a guaranteed maximum price. And the only way that he can do that and minimize his risk is by fully understanding the project, looking at the plans, making recommendations on the design, and basically offsetting the potential for, or not offsetting, but eliminating the potential for change orders.
May I say something?
Yes, Ms. City Attorney.
I don't want anyone to think that there won't be change orders. There could be change orders. The experience, I've done a lot of these projects, the experience is that with the CM at risk project, you minimize change orders, but there could, if there's a change in scope, if there's unforeseen conditions and so forth, you will have change orders, but those are the reason to do a CMAR project is because when you bring the construction contractor on board at the same time as the design, they find a lot of problems while they can still be fixed early. So that's why it eliminates a lot of change orders. I just didn't want you to think you might not have any change orders. Sorry, Woody.
No, that's all right. Fine, thank you.
Do you have anything else you want to add, Mr. Skelton?
No, sir.
Okay, Councilman Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the bottom of the proposal, they've got a sub-consultant and then pothole designation, and that's roughly $55,000 of the contract. Is that them bringing in another sub? And then what are they doing with the potholes, or what is that?
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Clare, the purpose of that, and that's an allowance that we may not necessarily use or use all of it, But the purpose of that is when we have maps of utilities that are supplied by utility companies, a lot of times, or most of the time, they don't even call out the depth of their utilities. So when we have a utility that's running through, an existing utility that's running through a street where we also have to install water, sewer, storm drain, other utilities, we need to know exactly the depth of that utility. So that's what the pothole process is. We go out and expose that and actually measure the depth of it, so we know exactly where it is. So it's not a big surprise when we do that construction.
Thank you, Woody.
You're good, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, Woody, does that potholing, are you anticipating using that to figure out where that large regional gas line is that runs through there?
Absolutely. That's one of the first lines that'll be potholed.
I will chime in and say that from the processes that I've seen in these large contracts, the CM at risk has worked well. It's the way that roads are basically being built by Magna and the state, because it gives it makes the project run a lot smoother, gets the design work done in a way that you're going to be able to build to it because you got the contractor involved from the start. And I think this is the lowest cost way for the city to proceed. I'm not really excited about spending $180,000 today, but if we want to be in a position at the start of 22 to be able to know exactly what this is going to cost and try to figure out how we're going to do it, I think this is the best way to do that, because we'll have a construction manager who is literally at risk to be able to build what we need and what we've approved at a cost that that has a certain cost, a fixed number. So I think it's a very good idea. So is there a motion to approve a construction manager at risk contract with the Arch and Gardner Construction LLC in the amount of $180,415.94?
So moved.
Councilman Romack, is that?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Brainerd Watson will second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion by the council? If not, all those in favor of approving the construction manager at risk contract, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, Councilman Brainerd Watson, I assume you voted aye, but I need it on the record. Okay, thank you. With that, the contract is approved, so you'll be able to go forward and get that finished.
Thank you.
There's no other business before us, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion from Councilman Donahue. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, that's Councilman Rostosi. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you again for the meeting this evening. We appreciate all the time it takes to get through.
Mayor,
Mayor,
Yes.
we have an additional meeting following this.
I was ready to go home. I need water. Okay. I forgot. We got CFD to do. So even though I'm happy you guys got here for the council meeting, I have to hope you'll stay for the CFD meeting.
Mayor, I have another question. At what
Yes.
point on the agenda I was going to give a quick little thing about schools? No?
We messed up because I didn't realize that we didn't have the presentation section for council. So
Okay.
we'll let you do it right now. If you do
Okay.
it, and we're gonna keep Susan muted.
Okay.
We'll make it a quick.
I just think it's important to update on what's going on with our schools. Needless to say, our leaders have been incredible. Both Awafria School District and Litchfield have 4 scenarios. So the good news is what will be happening in Litchfield is they will be starting remotely on August 5th. However, teachers in the Litchfield district will be teaching from their classrooms. And they're doing that for a good reason, and that is to keep the classified staff employed And then there'll be care for the staff's children and so forth. So the teachers will be in the classroom, the children will be at home. Of course, August 17th, we're pretty sure will come and go. So that's not written in pen. So that's the Litchfield district. The middle school, if they go, and then if they go back, middle schoolers will all be kept in one class and teachers will come to them. High school will be starting remotely on August 5th as well. Looks like they will be taking each student will be taking 3 classes for the semester, even if they come back. So that sounds like they're going to be doing a year's worth of class the first semester and then a year's worth the second semester. So bless their hearts. Everybody's had a tough time, but we have incredible leadership. And if anyone asks, go to the website. They all have all things COVID link on their websites. Litchfield has a new website and they're, oh man. Anyway, support them any way you can, as in applaud them. So at this point, remotely, all districts all over the state are doing lots of different things, but that's existing right now, what Awafria and Litchfield are doing. And Avondale's part of that as well, because they're all connected. Anyway, okay, thanks.
Thank you for letting us know what's going on with the school district.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Village at Litchfield Park Community Facilities District to order. First item of business is approval of the minutes. They're in your packet. Are there any questions about the minutes? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Donahue. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by the vice, well, you're not the vice mayor anymore. I'm not sure what you are. The vice, whatever. The member of the facilities district member, Paul Faith, has seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Councilman or member Brainerd Watson?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. The minutes are adopted. Next item of business is a discussion and possible approval of resolution CFD 20-40, setting the ad valorem tax levy for the CFD within the Village of Litchfield Park in the amount of $363,650, and authorize Maricopa County to calculate the final rate per $100 of assessed value. Is there any discussion by council of concerning this action item? If not, is there a motion to adopt resolution CFD 20-40?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Clare, seconded by the Vice Mayor. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Councilor, member Brainerd Watson?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. All of the items of business are done, so is there a motion to adjourn? From Councilman Donahue, member Donahue. Is there a second?
Second.
Member Clare seconded it. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Member Brainerd Watson.
Aye.
All right, we are officially adjourned. So again, thank you for your attention and coming to this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Bye.
Night all.
Aye.
Night.